video, I did a quote-unquote build on maximizing the potency of Indebted Kindness, not just through the God roll, but through subclass synergy. So if you use the Arc subclass, then you can use these 4 fragments right here. You might want to take a screenshot or take note. This is in order of importance, I would say. Spark of Beacons, right? That's going to turn your rockets coming out of your sidearm into flashbang grenades. Spark of Discharge is going to give you ionic traces. Spark of Ions is going to give you ionic traces. Spark of Amplitude is going to create orbs of power. So basically with 1 kill, you can jolt enemies, do ad clear, set off a blinding explosion to control the ads that are left over, get 2 ionic traces and 2 orbs of power, right? If you're using Arc Siphon with Spark of Amplitude, it happens. You're going to get 1 kill, you're going to get 2 traces and 2 orbs, and it's just going to feel really good. So you can give Indebted Kindness a ton of stopping power by using these 4 fragments, but I would not necessarily recommend it if you're looking to go into Legend Onslaught up to wave 50. You know, the previous video was just basically showing you how you can totally maximize Indebted Kindness for all you Indebted Kindness lovers out there, right? Try it, it's fun. However, somebody in the comment section of that video did mention, like, well, I don't really see the point of Arc Bolt grenades and Lucky Raspberry, you know, it doesn't look like it's that good. Yeah, because the video was about Indebted Kindness and pretty much Indebted Kindness alone, right? Like, it was not really much about the build crafting at all. It was more about just synergizing with the God roll and making the weapon better. However, this video is a spin-off of that comment of the last video, because this build actually is not bad. I did get a Legend 50 clear with over 700 kills, and it was pretty survivable as well, so it was extremely effective in that build. I made a few tweaks so it wasn't like the same fragments exactly that I was using for my Indebted Kindness video, because I wanted to actually have, you know, a build to go along with Indebted Kindness as opposed to solely focusing on that. So what is the build here? The video is probably titled, I'm saying probably because I haven't made the thumbnail yet as of doing the commentary here, but it's probably going to be called Double Lucky. That's because I'm using Lucky Raspberry with Lucky Pants, and so I switched out, like, obviously I'm using Lucky Pants for damage, for boss damage, hence Malfeasance, but for all my ad clear and for the waves and the bulk of the gameplay, it's Lucky Raspberry. Okay, so, and just before I switch over to the actual build that I was using, copy this right now, take a screenshot, whatever you want. If you want to use the 4 fragments that I just went over for Indebted Kindness and you want to pair it with this exotic, then I would use these mods right here, right? It's low end content. You might be doing normal Onslaught or other content that's normal. You don't need as much damage resistance, and you don't really need armor charge to give you more damage on your weapons. So you can just lay full on into Charged Up with stacks on stacks and Reaper and Grenade Kickstart, so you just get even more Arc Bolt grenades and then special finishers, so that you can, if you got full stacks of armor charge, which you'll have pretty much all the time, then you can go ahead and finish an enemy if you run out of ammo, right? So that's what I would use for lower end content, okay? Now, switching over to the Legend Onslaught version of the build, it's going to look like this. So I just switched. This is what I ended up settling on that I found was most optimized. Heavy-handed here is one of the differences instead of Kickstart, because I can just lay into the Arc Strider subclass. The Arc Strider subclass almost doesn't need a build as long as you've got Flow State and Lethal Current and Combination Blow. You can just do the punch dodge gameplay loop of Arc Strider, and it's an extremely effective build by itself, right? Like, you barely need an exotic. So heavy-handed just kind of works hand in hand with that punch dodge gameplay loop. And then I'm using 1 copy of Arc Weapon Surge to make Indebted Kindness and Hothead do 10% more damage with Harmonic Scavenger, mainly because I'm using a rocket launcher here for burst damage. Not necessarily needed for Indebted Kindness because it's so ammo efficient already that you don't really need it, but with rockets especially, instead of picking up 1 heavy ammo brick to get 1 single rocket, you'll always get at least 2 with Harmonic Scavenger. So, you know, it takes you much further if you're using rockets or any weapon that has less ammo overall in its reserves. Recuperation for survivability, you use that powerful attraction dodge, you get some health back, and time dilation just to give a little bit more time on arc weapon surge, and then because we're not using charged up, we're using concussive here for more survivability, right? So the mods, that's the mods. Fragments that I'm using here, this is the more important part. I should have gone over this first. Usually the mods are just kind of like a complementary part of the build, but you'll notice here that I'm using only 2 of the fragments that I was using to maximize Indebted Kindness, which is Spark of Beacon, Spark of Discharge, right? They're still very important, I find, with Indebted Kindness. You're still going to get that crowd control with the blinding explosions, which can also stun unstoppable champions, by the way. And then you're also going to get your ionic traces from Spark of Discharge. If you're going to use Lucky Raspberry, then you need some way of getting ionic traces if you're really going to take full advantage of Lucky Raspberry, because what it does is you get ionic traces, it gives you arc bolt grenade energy. And yes, ionic traces gives you ability energy across the board no matter what subclass or build you're using. But with Lucky Raspberry, you get way more grenade energy from one single ionic trace. It's like you pick up like 2 ionic traces and all of a sudden you got your grenade back right away. So you can really chain back-to-back arc bolt grenades. Also, you get grenade energy by jolting enemies, right? And intrinsically, the grenade stuns overloads, which is cool. This is a change they added, I think, with Wish, but it's kind of irrelevant because Spark of Shock is needed anyways, and typically we're always using Spark of Shock. We add Jolt to your arc grenades, that's going to apply overload, it's going to stun overload champions, is going to apply disruption to all enemies and reduce their damage output and increase your survivability. So it's kind of redundant, the fact that Lucky Raspberry has the ability to stun overloads even without Jolt, but we're using Jolt anyways because we want the add clear added to arc bolt grenades. Without Spark of Shock, arc bolt grenades suck. It's that simple. Even if you can spam them back to back, they're just not good. So adding Spark of Shock is necessary for higher end content, I would say, for sure. And then Spark of Resistance, because 25% extra damage resistance while surrounded, and I think it's something like if you're within like 3 enemies that are like 30 feet away, like it's very generous as far as the radius for being surrounded. You get a ton of damage resistance, so very good. Both of these are taking the place of the other 2 fragments that I showed at the beginning of the video. And then I always use Gambler's Dodge pretty much on Arc Strider, so I can get into the punch dodge gameplay loop. You got your marksmans, you got your combination blow, you've got extra survivability while dodging from flow state, lethal current, applying jolt on those melee hits. Pretty straightforward there. Stat distribution, 100 discipline because we want to spam those grenades, and that's pretty much all you need. I'm using Malfeasance here to swap over to Lucky Pants and do a bunch of burst damage. Indebted Kindness, we talked about that. Hothead here. Okay, so this is actually kind of important. I was using Storm Chaser originally, but on the gameplay that you're going to see here, which I'm going to give you a 10 wave sample of some decent gameplay from the 50 wave completion instead of chopping up a whole bunch of highlights, which is going to take me forever and then you'll never get a video. This way I can actually get something out to you a little bit quicker. But I was using linears because linears are overcharged right now this week in Legend Onslaught. But somebody on my fire team, random LFG, no mic run, but I noticed that somebody was using Gallahorn the entire time. So I after like the first 10 waves or so, I switched over to Hothead so that I can capitalize on those Wolfpack rounds and just burst damage in general. So you might be thinking, well, why the heck are you using Hothead and not Crux Termination? I thought Hothead was power crept out of the game. Well, let's look at the stat differences between Hothead and Crux Termination. For one, Hothead is way better. This role has auto-loading and tracking, okay? And so this is extremely important here. If you don't know, like, the power of having 2 perks that are good in a single column, this means that you can use 1 perk for one purpose and 1 perk for another purpose on the same weapon without losing ammo, without losing your stacks of explosive light. So this means when I'm doing the waves, I can use auto-loading so that I can just pull out my rocket whenever I want to do immediate burst damage, just like immediately take out the demolitionists or overload champs or ogres or whatever. It's going to do a ton of damage. And then when I get to the boss phase, I can switch my loadout to my Lucky Pants build, maintain all my ammo and my stacks of explosive light, but all of a sudden this is going to be on tracking module, right? And I'll show you right here. So look, I switch over to my Lucky Pants build. Everything is the same in my subclass because we don't want to lose our super or our abilities, but now Hothead has tracking, right? Which is good because it means I can stay far away from the boss and not miss rockets. The one advantage of using a linear in the boss fight is you can just, it's very good on ammo economy. You're much less likely to miss your shots, right? Because it's basically hit scan and you got like 20 shots, whereas with a rocket, it's very bad if you miss a shot. Like you're losing like, 10s, 20% of your damage just by missing a rocket here or there, right? So then I switch back over to my wave build and it's got auto loading holster, right? It's the exact same rocket launcher. So the thing with Crux Termination is it doesn't have auto loading or tracking module in the left column, I'm pretty sure. Like obviously this one here is very good with clown and explosive light. I would definitely use it on like a raid boss or a dungeon boss, but for Legend Onslaught where you're not on a timer for a damage phase and you need to stay safe at long range, then tracking module in the left is going to be very beneficial with explosive light. On Crux Termination, tracking module is on the right column, so it means that you would not have access to explosive light, right? You can get like clown and tracking, but you can't get explosive and tracking. And there's no auto loading. There is reconstruction, but I'm using auto loading here. So Hothead's still very good. Also, it's adept as opposed to Crux Termination, which is a world drop, and world drops, as far as I know, are never going to have enhanceable perks. We do know that Nightfall weapons will have access to enhanceable perks. Will that work all the way back with Hothead, which has been out of the game for several seasons now? I'm not sure. If it does, that'll be very cool. I'm definitely going to hang on to this one and enhance it, right? Because it has very good purpose. Also has Vanguard's Vindication, so you get some health back on kills, which is nice on a subclass that you don't have a whole lot of access to healing with, right? So that's pretty much it for the build. None of the artifacts are really mattering that much, but we're using Overload Rocket Launcher obviously to stun overloads, get 25% more damage from it being overcharged, because secretly there's the overcharged weapons modifier, as far as I know, is still active inside of Onslaught, even though it's not listed as a modifier on the screen, unlike Nightfalls. Also use Blast Radius so you can get some extra armor charge for free, why not? But yeah, basically nothing matters in the seasonal artifact except for your champion stunts. Then I switched to Lucky Pants for boss damage, and all I'm doing here is I'm using 2 kinetic surges instead of 1, or instead of just arc, right? So I'm using Hothead's better, Malfeasance is better, and you might be thinking, well, why don't you use Warden's Law? Warden's Law is very good, but it's also a lot less forgiving than Malfeasance. Malfeasance gives you the ability to intrinsically stun unstoppable champions. You can do add clear with Malfeasance because it does like damage over time from the explosive slugs, I guess. You hit an enemy with sustained damage and then all of a sudden you're doing damage over time. With Warden's Law, Warden's Law is pretty much only useful on bosses, and you have to be more accurate. With Malfeasance, you miss a few shots, who cares? Even if illegally modded holster isn't active, you can still do good damage with Malfeasance, right? With Warden's Law, you absolutely need illegally modded holster, and you need to be on point with your shots. So that's the difference there. That's how Warden's Law can be better, yes, but generally speaking, Malfeasance is better, especially if you don't have like the best aim like me and you're older and whatever. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the double lucky build and the spin-off of the last video of Indebted Kindness. So I will add the gameplay here next. You can look forward to that, and I will see you in the next one.